Welcome to PT Pro Talk, the podcast for physical therapists who want to improve their clinical skills and be more successful. I am Mariana Parks, physical therapist and your host, and today I'll be interviewing Steven Coen to discuss what everyone is getting wrong about remote therapeutic monitoring, RTM. We will talk about what RTM is and the 4 codes we can view, common misconceptions, who can benefit from using it, and the full ROI picture, and much more. Steven is the CEO and co-founder of SaRA Health, a company that automates RTM. He earned his education in Finance and Entrepreneurship at Kansas State and an MBA at UCLA Anderson. If you find this information valuable, please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell for updates, give us a thumbs up, and share with other clinicians who could benefit from this information. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoyed the show. PT Pro Talk is only possible with the support of the forward-looking and innovative companies like Systems for PT, the Do Anything Anytime EMR. Systems for PT develops systems for clinicians so you can focus on your patients. Go to systemsforpt.com to schedule a demo today. Remote therapeutic monitoring sounds great, but also difficult. SaRA Health makes RTM simple and easy for your patients and providers. Check out SaRaHealth.com to learn more. Hi, Steven. Welcome to PT Pro Talk. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Thank you so much for having me on, and I'm really excited for the conversation we're going to have.
Awesome. That's a very exciting topic and new for the industry. So let's get started talking a little bit about yourself and your background.
Absolutely, and I'll keep this short. I'm a frustrated patient, so I've been blessed by some amazing physical therapists after I tore my ACL, my meniscus, my labrum. I like to joke that my parents gave me a lot of good genes, but ligaments and cartilage were not included in that package. And so I'm thankful to the PTs that I've seen in order to be able to move the way that I do today. However, I was always so frustrated by the lack of continuity in between visits and how it just felt like recovery started and stopped in the clinic. And then there was just like, okay, we can't see anymore. Like, we're done. Like that's it. It just, that frustrated me. And I knew it wasn't the fault of the clinician, right? And so over the years, I've worked launching businesses, whether that be my own, the startup I launched in college, or the startups that I launched within Deloitte Consulting. And my journey to healthcare was, I can still remember it. It was at our dinner table for my wife and I in our apartment in LA. So I was getting my MBA at UCLA. I had done nothing in healthcare prior to that and had sworn it off. Like, y'all are crazy. I don't understand why you would deal with all this regulation, like all this stuff. And then she's type 1 diabetic, and that's when Dexcom came out with the non-calibration continuous glucose monitor, which she was a floor nurse, so like calibrations were not ideal to say the least. She starts wearing it, is able to get her, be able to better control her disease instead of her disease controlling her. And that was my light bulb moment of, oh, this is why people go into healthcare. Like, I cannot have that impact in any other industry ever. And so that was the start of the SaRA journey. I didn't know at the time, but the start of the SaRA journey, and found my 2 co-founders. So the lead, who was getting his master's in computer science at UCLA when I was getting my MBA. And then our 3rd co-founder, Paul, who's our chief clinical officer. And he's been at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester for about a decade. And that's the team and my background is the relevant parts that have led to today.
Awesome. And so let's start talking about what is RTM, remote therapeutic monitoring. That's the big question.
And I'll give the textbook definition, and then I want to opine on what I think it really means. So RTM, so remote therapeutic monitoring, 4 new CPT codes, at least for the musculoskeletal, that came out on January 1st of 2022. As we look at it, they are called children codes to remote patient monitoring that came out in 2018. And remote patient monitoring has 2 key limitations. 1, it has to be a physician. 2, it has to be a hardware device. But despite those limitations, it still continues to have amazing impact. So Medicare estimated that in 2019, so in a single year, they saved 6 to 8 billion, so billion with a B, $6 to $8 billion for COPD patients alone on reduced admissions and readmissions, right? That's powerful, right? It doesn't take a logical leap to get there. Oh, we saw things out of the ordinary and were able to get to them before they became real issues. Like, okay, that makes sense, right? So they saw that. And then in 2022, they decided to take away those two big blockers that I talked about. So instead, for the RTM, remote therapeutic monitoring, it can be a qualified healthcare practitioner like a physical therapist, an assistant, OT, COTA, and it can be software as a medical device as well. So it does not have to be hardware. We can get into the software as a medical device or SAMD part if we need to. So that's the history, right? This isn't a gift, which is good because gifts are not self-sustaining. Things that replay into the system are, which CMS has already seen in RPM. It's not telehealth, so it's very, very different. We have this conversation a lot with practice owners, and we find that most are either at a -1, as we call it, a 0, or like 3 on a scale of 5 knowledge level. And -1 is, oh, I did RTM back in COVID. Like, nope, completely different codes. We need to come back and bring you back to 0 to get started. And I think there's a lot of folks that are on call it 1 who don't believe it's applicable to them for any given reason. And I think we'll have a good discussion on why that might be a falsely held belief during this conversation. So that's, again, keep drilling layers down. That's what they are. It's 4 CPT codes. We have names for them. So 98975, we call that the connect code. So did you connect with your patient and stay connected for a period of time? If so, check, you can bill for that code. Medicare national average is about $19 for that, right? So no time required for that code by a clinician. Then 98977, we call the engage code. So did the patient engage for 16 or more days in a 30-day period? If so, check. You can bill for that code. Again, no time required by the clinician. That's where, as we believe, it's on the RTM software that you use to get that patient to connect and engage. Now, the last two codes, 98980 and 98981, we call them the support codes. So did you provide support to your patient outside of the visit? If so, and you accrue at least 20-minute chunks, you can bill for 98980, which is the first 20 minutes in a calendar month, and then 98981, which is each additional 20 minutes in that calendar month. And I realized I did forget the national average for 98977 is $51, and that's Medicare. We have seen all sorts of stuff across the board for commercials. So we've seen some commercials paying as much as $56 for 98975, so nearly 3 times as much the Medicare national average. We've seen commercials that have been in the at least high 30s, like I think we've seen 38 sometimes for 98977, but we've also seen north of 70, and even one practice in particular I'm thinking of, I think got paid like $102 per 98977. So it, for better or worse, it's all over the map, and there are still payers that aren't covering it, although those are becoming more and more the minority, like the tiny minority, with most at this point covering. There was a great coverage decision by United that came out early this year, where they are covering, although we'd seen it in 2023, it already being paid for by United. Blues plans, it's dependent. If you're in Tennessee, you're in great shape. If you're in Alabama, not as much. And then we have data across the states for anyone interested in taking a deeper dive on what it means to them.
Okay, that's a great overview. Okay, many questions. So the first code, you said is a connect code. So you have to connect with the patient. What exactly means? What it counts as connection?
So enrolling them onto your platform and them having been monitored for 16 or more days in a 30-day period. So it's not the level of the engage code that requires the patient to engage, right, for 16 or more days in the 30-day period. The connect is more of a reward for educating the patient and the patient not dropping off within those first 16 days. So it's a lower threshold, which makes sense given the lower reimbursement amount.
Okay. So like if you are using the second code, that is the engagement code, it's assumed that you're going to have a technology to engage with them. So if you enroll them on the technology, you're going to get the two codes. Is that right?
Very possibly. Each software platform has different, we call it billability, and we track that extremely closely. So in our case, if you enroll a patient, there's about a 60% chance that you will be able to bill for both 98975 and 98977 for that patient. We have practices that are actually at near 100. So everyone they get put on every patient is highly engaged. Now, they might be slightly more selective in who they enroll, which could be contributing to that, whereas others are just, let's try everybody. But there's also some things you can do, and we can get into some best practices that we've seen to be able to impact that billability number.
Okay. So like if you just enroll the patient, you are already getting the first code.
As long as the patient doesn't opt out within that first 16 days, yes. So there's still a little bit there that you have to achieve, right? Or else, and I get why that's there to ensure that's not just like educate and like done, right? So as we read and have talked to others like BCMS and other compliance leaders, it is, did the patient stay monitored for 16 days, which is a different threshold than did they engage for 16 or more days.
Okay. And then when you say engage, so what it counts as engagement? Is like text, phone calls, emails, like what is it?
So the letter of the law is a day of data exchange. And so as we read that, we believe it is a patient sent piece of data to the provider through the software as a medical device, which then to answer your question of, is that text, is that phone, what is that? That is going to be dependent on the software as a medical device your practice chooses to facilitate these codes. And so for us, it is a text message. So did the patient text back? If so, check, there's a day of data exchange that has happened, right? And so it depends for others that use apps or web apps and other things, right? Like if you have your patients on an app, then they need to log in and then submit something like, hey, I did this exercise or not. So it just depends on which one you go with. We are just text messages. So that's, we'd like to think it's pretty frictionless.
Yeah, so they have to just respond the text.
Correct.
Okay. And how you prove that? Like, when you submit that, like,
So how do we prove that? A couple different ways. So one is we have a letter from the FDA. We received it in early October of last year that confirms we are a software as a medical device, or we have functionality that meets the threshold of software as a medical device. So we have that, they didn't put it in gold like a Willy Wonka letter, but that's how I see it, is that way. So we have confirmation from the FDA that we are a software as a medical device. And then the data that we get back, we have some mechanisms within our platform that act automatically. You don't have to touch this if you're a provider or owner, but act automatically in order to be able to make sure we are getting clinical data back to you. And so we have some mechanisms in there. And then last, we decided to go measure it and like, hey, is this really working? Like, is this really good? Like, we're seeing reimbursement. That's good. We're seeing high patient engagement. That's good. But what does it mean? And so with a practice we've been working with for over a year, we took the photo scores of a control group. So same clinicians, all Medicare patients, and we looked at the photo scores of a control group versus one on SaRA. And what we found is that it's an amazing practice with some very skilled practitioners. And on average, they were beating photo expectations for the discharge score by 14 points, right? So they're phenomenal practice. Can't say enough about that, right? The SaRA group beat photo expectations by 26 points.
Wow.
So blew photo expectations out of the water. And we were shocked to see that be the case. And we were shocked to see it be that much of a difference. We weren't shocked to see that it did help, right? So you thinking of what makes a recovery and what makes a really powerful recovery story. It's a patient that's empowered, feels like they're getting checked in on, feels a little extra love, right? If you do those things, that patient is, there's other research beyond ours, right? There's other research to show that an empowered patient, like Katie bar the door, it's going to be a fun time. And so we just now have some additional outcomes measurements and studies that support our assumption.
It's crazy. Like I'm just shocked by the amount of the difference just by like engaging with them, because you're not like providing exercises or like making sure like they are doing the exercises. I mean, you are asking, but like there is no way that you can really know if they're doing. You are just like keep them engaged. Like it's shocking to see the difference.
It is. So it is and it isn't. So we've been doing this. We like to joke that we've been doing RTM since before it was cool. So we started SaRA Health back in 2017. And the primary groups that we worked with were these physical therapy practices that sold directly into high-risk employers, and particularly firefighters. So we had like dozens of fire stations, well, actually dozens of fire departments, who knows how many fire stations on the platform, and into the thousands of firefighters that were on SaRA Health. And what we realized was, and we had our own web app, and we were delivering exercises because we had integrated with this other thing, and yeah, that was really cool. But we found there was a portion of the population that wouldn't engage more than once out of every 3 days, which, if you know anything about the fire service, is when they're on shift. And so we asked that group, which we found out to be the highest risk group. So that was typically your 30 to 50, I think it's 51, because I think they get forced off the truck on 52. So 30 to 51-year-old that wanted to stay on the truck and didn't have a smartphone or only had one computer at home that they shared with their husband or wife and didn't want to use that. All of these things that made it like, nah, I'm not logging into something outside of the station. And so that's like, well, would you respond to a text? And I still remember one of the interviews was, well, if it was a good text, then yeah. So that was what we went off of from there. I was like, okay. And so we found all sorts of interesting stats. So for example, in that population, which I think you can apply broadly, if you ask an adherence question for 4 days in a row, your engagement's going to drop to less than 5%, which was the people who were going to respond and do all their stuff anyways. So like we learned little bits like that. And I say little, but actually really major unlocks that when these codes came out, it's like, we've been doing this for like 4 years now. So I'm glad everyone else has caught on. Let's go.
Yeah, that's crazy. Everything aligned. So now you could use your solution to make more money.
Yeah.
Help clinicians make more money, practice owners make more money. So just to see if I got the part of the documentation. So like you're going to prove, so you're going to apply those codes, and then you're going to include the part, it's going to be part of your documentation, the engagement data that you had on your platform. Then the clinicians are going to add that to their EMRs or whatever they are using to submit as part of documentation and like as a proof. Is that
yes,
right?
That's correct. So we supply that to the clinician per patient per code. So all they have to do is copy and paste in. They can always edit it if they want to. We did a medical policy review. I believe 20 different medical policies across the U.S. and found the most stringent that we could find was Anthem. And so we auto create the documentation based on Anthem's requirements. And then, yes, it is like overkill for Medicare, but no one seems to complain about dragging a little bit, copying a little bit more if it gives them a lower chance of having to reopen the note. So that's how we do it. I can't speak to other platforms, but it just copy and paste it in and bill it. We do have trainings on all the major EMRs with walkthroughs. Hey, here's how to bill this, as well as a flow chart for why you would think about when you would think about billing these codes. So we figured out that the Medicare treats things differently than commercial, and commercial has all sorts of other variations within that. And so as part of our training process, we have basically a training on, okay, if it's Medicare and they're billable that day, probably should just bill it that day because it's easy, just do it. If you're seeing someone tomorrow, okay, and you just want to tack it onto that visit, that's fine, right? But don't let it just linger for a while. Now, for a commercial patient, if they become billable on the same day as a visit, and you have, say, a 4 CPT code limit, or you have a day rate limit or per diem of $65, $75, whatever that is, right? Don't bill the RTM codes on that day. Instead, wait till the next day and bill it as a non-visit event, which we have training for all that stuff too. And yeah, we try to take the complexity out of it by just showing the flow chart, like if this, that, if this, that.
Yeah, I was just asking to see in like real terms, like what does it mean to clinicians, like how much more they're gonna add, because I imagine that's a objection of, PTs are burdened under documentation. And talking to about myself, I was in a big company, they were implementing RTM, and then I was like, man, I have to go home and sometimes stay over 2 hours finishing billing because I like to stay with the patient. I have a hard time just like dropping, staying on my computer, typing all the time. So then I will suffer later. And then I was like, imagine adding more stuff on top of that. I was like, that's going to be insane. So I imagine there has to be something easy to be done so the PTs are not, pushing back too much.
Revolt, mutiny are words that we hear thrown out quite a bit. So with the groups that we work with, simple and easy are what we hear a lot when they describe SaRA, and that's the biggest compliment that they could ever pay us. And that is it. We understand that RTM, the codes are not going to double the size of your practice, right? Like you got to put it in the magnitude of the potential impact. And so because of that, we know that the resource requirement that we ask from a therapist has to be incredibly, incredibly small to nothing. So our goal is to get to a point where there is zero admin requirement on the therapist. We're not quite there yet, although we have some things that are working pretty well that get it pretty close to that, or at least as little admin, but so much clinical value that I got to do that, but it's totally worth it because of this new relationship that I have. And I think we find a lot, we work primarily with private practice is our main, and so many of these private practices have a check-in with your patient, after their eval, or, some are giving a call to all their evals that prior week, right? All of those activities, well, now they're like, wait, I can do that with SaRA. I can have the front desk enroll on my behalf, and then I can actually potentially save time at the start of the visit because I know what's happened in between our last visit. I don't have to ask, hey, Mariana, how was your pain on Sunday, right? You're going to give me a terrible answer. That's it. We're humans. And now I'm like, hey, Mariana, I noticed that your pain, you noticed your pain, you said 5 last week. Now Sunday you said 2. Saying your exercises are getting a little too easy for you. Let's talk about that. And so as you can imagine, that conversation goes much, much better versus, and I'm not a clinician, right? I'm on the patient side. I remember being frustrated by the question. And so now we're able to get that timestamped valid data at the time it's occurring to the clinician, although they don't have to read it immediately. It's there to be able to say, your exercises are too easy, or, oh, too many. Like, how big of a problem is that, right? It's giving too many exercises. The patient, I'm guilty of this, saying, you know what? Of course I will do all 6 of those exercises. First day out, there's no way I'm doing all 6 of those exercises. And I was guilty of this in a bout of PT I had mid last year. And it's like, yeah, I'll do all 6. And then I had to text Tim, hey man, I'm not going to do all 6. Like, okay, well, do these 3 on this day and do these 3 on this day for your workouts. And I think you'll see the best response from that. And it's like, perfect, right? And that's a great use of RTM, right? And you don't think about that as RTM, which I think is that's our goal, is to move well away from these codes. And like, I even had, I think, a LinkedIn post recently, like, stop calling it RTM. Like, no patient wants to be remotely therapeutically monitored, right? No one gets excited about it. That's not it. What I think it is, in our opinion, is it's a way to give more independence to the provider and patient so they can titrate the visits, or really the mode and medium of care, in a way they see most effective. Whereas PT, up until these codes came out, and a little bit in telehealth, okay, a little bit, but for the most part, PT was just like the Henry Ford quote. You can have whatever color you want as long as that color is black. And PT was, you can have whatever type of interactions you want to, as long as that is 6 visits or 12 visits in 6 weeks, right? And I get it. You have to run a business. If you don't do that, you can't pay these wonderful people that are healing people every day, all day. I understand how we got here. But now, been given the opportunity at independence. And to me, it just feels like a major taking the handcuffs off and really letting folks practice the way that they want to, which may be never using RTM because they have a specific population that they need to be in person. Like, that's it. I would still argue there's probably benefit from engaging in between those visits, but like, I understand it's not for everyone. That's to me what it is. It's a way to be able to put more control back into the PT's hands.
Yeah, and it sounds like an incentive in the right direction, right? Because usually it's always like something that it doesn't help the treatment, like most of the things, but it feels like it helps the flow of the treatment, right? It's more accurate, the patient's responses more accurate because they're responding on the day that they're feeling, so they're not going to forget about it. They're going to be able to give you like the right data, and then you can adapt based on their real needs, and also see if they're implementing the exercises, because if they don't do anything outside the clinic, we know the results are not going to be near as good. And then at the same time, empowering them to do the exercises and like motivating them. So it sounds amazing.
It can be. That's the thing, is it can be, if you back to your earlier point, right, about your experience as a clinician and being so worried about another thing, right? So I think it can be, as long as the software platform comes in with the right mindset. And ours is, this is not a silver bullet for everything, and therefore our resource ask has to be minimal to zero. And the value we deliver has to be great, right? If you use just the simple, the tech switching cost, it has to be 10 times better than the alternative. And so the alternative is to do nothing, which is pretty good. So like, you have to figure out how to do that. And so we've come in with that mindset, and I think created something that has good outcomes backing to prove it does work, and has good both testimonials and actual data to prove that the ask on clinicians is extremely low.
So like on the clinician side would be basically like check what day you have to bill, copy and paste the documentation and add the code?
You technically don't even need to check because we tell you. So you don't even need to track that.
Good.
And then we have a triaging system that allows, or that gives the providers a it's a little bit of peace of mind. So if we know each response we categorize into either a standard or non-standard response. And so for standard response, there is no additional push notification. It's just, you can see a little red dot that has one, like, okay, I have an unread message, but there's no additional push versus any outlier or non-standard response. Then we alert you. So as a clinician, if you are busy, like they all are, then okay, SaRA is not going to let me know and try to get my attention unless there's a non-standard response or I can bill somebody. That's okay. I can handle that, right? Just give me only the things that I need to act on, and don't give me any more alert fatigue, which is something that we were always incredibly focused on, given our having a DPT as a co-founder is crazy. It's a superpower, right? It's a cheat code. So having him, and then also the other cheat code B is my wife. She's now a nurse practitioner, and seeing how just being able to see her what she is documenting at night, all that is very true. And okay, SaRA will never cause this. I see this every night, and SaRA will never cause this. So you have two very intent people out of three, and our CTO is the third. So he's like, yeah, I like that challenge. I want to make it work. So you have all three.
And when you see the messages that are not standard, can clinicians go and write messages as well, or is just on your
Correct.
end? Okay.
Yep, correct. So I like to say it like this: we make the first volley every day, but it's entirely up to you how the conversation goes from there. It could be, hey, Mariana, how's your pain on a scale of 0 to 10? You respond with 2, and you know what? Okay, that's it for today. We're good. I don't need to respond to that. Maybe I have some extra time. Say, oh, that's awesome. Can't wait to see you on Friday, whatever it is, right? And to continue along that path. So same question. Hey, how's your pain on a scale of 0 to 10? 2, because Lucy, you're a genius. So we would still alert Lucy. That's an actual message that we got. Lucy, hey, non-standard response from your patient Mariana. Up to you how you want to deal with that. But this is it. Lucy got the email. She smiled and went about her day. Right. And then could be a 9. I'm really sore after our visit yesterday and not feeling great. I don't know if PT is for me. Right. Which is also a very real response. And at that point, I think that's been happened a few times. Right. And a lot of times the PT is picking up the phone and calling that patient. Hey, don't worry about it. This is part of it. I expected this, right? But you're able to get in front of that thing instead of having either a cancellation or a no-show or someone just dropping out of care, and able to get ahead of it because of the open line of communication that's been created.
And that is powerful. So you can act before the person, is like, oh, that's not for me, and make their mind that they're going to give up and not go back. So at least you have a chance to intervene early in the process.
Exactly. And we're using prior research to help stack the deck in the PT's favor. So there's a great study by Dr. Brennan Spiegel. He was one of my professors at UCLA, and he did a study. He's a gastroenterologist, and used a chatbot back in, this was 2016, so a while back, to measure the truthfulness of patients across different mediums. So he measured from himself as the GI, his PA, his RN, his front desk, and the chatbot. And guess what? The truthfulness was that. So from GI all the way down to chatbot was the most truthful. GI was the least truthful. Why?
Oh, wow.
Now, granted, that is GI, right? You're generally talking about things to do with, expulsion, we'll just say. So it can be uncomfortable for a patient, especially one that's non-medical like myself. And so that's one piece, but there's white coat syndrome, right? You don't want to disappoint your provider. You don't want to seem as wrong or as broken as you are. And so having this, we're basically stacking the deck in your favor of getting more valid data by stripping out some of the things that are just part of natural human tendencies to have that white coat syndrome when you're in person in the clinic. So that
Yeah.
is an impact we've seen that's really positive, because you get actual true data that's not filtered through a lens of respect for the for the credentials, which can be a negative.
Yeah, that's interesting. Um, and then, so basically, like, you start the conversation with the messages every day, and then the PTs can pick up from there or not, or just leave it the way they respond, and then that's it.
Yep.
Okay, good. Going back to the codes, so there are two more, the support codes that you said that are outside of the visit. So how those codes work?
Yes. So for time spent doing data review, as well as any synchronous interaction, that time can be billed for now. So here's the rules around that. For 98980, it's the first 20 minutes. And for 98981, it's each subsequent 20 minutes in a calendar month. So I'm going to refer to them as the support codes. Those are the two codes. Their requirements are basically the same. It's just one, you get paid a little bit more for the first 20 minutes, and then the next you get paid a little bit less. So you have to have a few things. So you have to have 20 minutes in aggregate over a calendar month. And a question I get a lot of is, could that be like a minute every day? Yes, it absolutely could. It does not need to be at one fell swoop. It could be a minute every day. It could be down to, doing quick math off the top of my head, but 45 seconds, right, every day, if you want to check in every day. And then you have to have a synchronous touch point. So whether that's a Zoom or a phone call being the most common that we see, you have to have some touch point or synchronous interaction with the patient. The texting back and forth does not count, no matter how quick it is. It has to be either phone, Zoom, something synchronous with that patient, FaceTime. And there has to be a change to the plan of care. Now, this doesn't need to be earth-shattering, right? Like, Mariana, if I'm seeing you and I say, my pain has gone way down and I think the exercises are too easy, right? You don't have to take me from a single leg raise to, or maybe like sitting down 3 inches to a box to a full pistol squat, right? Like, it doesn't need to be groundbreaking to be a change to the plan of care, and even can be a change to the future trajectory, right? And so some things that we see are, hey, patient isn't quite responding to this plan the way I was thinking. And so now I want to test to see if this modality might be a better way. And so we'll begin doing that upon next in-person visit, right? Which, again, you're talking about saving a visit there, right? Because that if you don't get that data in and you don't have that conversation, then you probably go another visit and then maybe change after that, which this is just really about helping speed up the discovery process and creating a better relationship and a better just stream of communication between patients and providers.
And like, do you offer those too? Or is just like you're mainly on these two first codes?
We do not provide any sort of clinical assistance, and what I mean by that is we will not provide providers to get you to those thresholds, but we do give you easy ways to track that. We suggest time that could be allotted to it, and then we also give you documentation whenever those support codes are billable as well. So it still needs to be your time as a provider. We don't believe in getting in between the provider and patient relationship. There are others that have that business model, and I know there are really good uses of that delivery model. It's just for us, it just doesn't align with our mission and our vision and values. So we don't provide any of that time or any of those providers to get to that 20 minutes. We just make it really easy for you to capture that time, so that way you can get paid appropriately.
Yeah, they sounds a little bit harder, a little more, you have to put a little more effort on that than just the engagements and things. So, and then we'd have to see how you're going to prove that you call, and like, I don't know, it's just more stuff.
There's more stuff there. And so with every practice we start with, I say, hey, for the first 60 to 90 days, don't touch the support codes. All you care about is connect and engage. Now, when you get a just gift of an opportunity to do it, take advantage of it, right? If I had to guess, it'll probably be pickleball related. You'll probably be treating somebody who wants to either play pickleball better or wants to recover from an injury because they are excited about pickleball. It's like what CrossFit was, right, to PT back in the 2010s. And so, hey, and this is a very, very real example of one of our practice's first support code was the PT. He calls me. He's like, hey, I just had a patient text back in that they fell during their pickleball game and can't do their exercises. So I spent like 5 minutes like looking at their chart and looking at the detail of the message and what their HEP is. And then I called the patient. We had like a 20-minute conversation. And then in which I said, hey, you know what, don't do anything until we can see each other again, and got her moved up a couple of days. Like, is that a support code? I'm like, yes, that is like textbook. That's great, right? It's terrible that it happened, but like a great use of the technology and a great application of those codes, because you were able to know something happened, react to it, and provide that patient a better experience and a better plan, of more applicable plan of care because of it, without seeing them. Like, there it is.
Yeah. Yes. Awesome. And so we know that the practice owners are going to benefit from it because they're going to have more revenue. Who else is going to benefit from it? Patients have better treatment.
Yeah.
PTs
patients have better outcomes.
Might be rewarded for it or not. So like, who do you see getting a benefit from using it?
Oh, that is so dependent on practice, on like who gets the most, right? If I have 10 value units to deliver, the 3 to each, and then I got to pick one to get 4. It's so dependent upon practice and what they're measuring and what their goals are. For, I think of one practice that they don't call it RTM, they call it concierge care, which I love. I think that's brilliant. And to them, it's kind of equal, right? It's the equal value where they get to have a stronger relationship with their patients, which their patients appreciate. Patient, based on our prior research, is likely going to have a better functional outcome, and they do a profit share. So the owner and the provider are all going to benefit in that scenario. And so, yeah, that and others, it may lean towards more of the practice owner, potentially, depending upon how they decide to reimburse or to compensate for these codes. But as we've seen, the compensation discussion and structure can be really interesting. We decided to do a little experiment with one practice. We love running experiments, and we decided to see, okay, let's see what happens to enrollment, patient enrollment, based on 2 different messages. The message in one monthly meeting was, hey, by the way, you get paid more for this because we have a productivity-based structure. If you bill these codes, you get paid more. And here's an example of one of your PTs who is going to get a brand new set of golf clubs and a few other things because he was able to bill. He's crushing it with SaRA. Enrollment jumped about 10%. Then we did it, showing them the outcome study. Hey, patients achieved better functional outcomes if they were on SaRA than if not, and enrollment jumped 25%. So the compensation piece is a super, super interesting space because of, as one owner told me, that PTs are all endowed with the Peace Corps gene. And so it's not always, in fact, it's rarely ever going to be all about money. And you're not going to do something if it's only for the money, which is why we did the outcome study, why we continue to try to make it as simple as possible, is for those reasons. So it's a very long answer to your question. I'd say there is value evenly distributed, and then depending upon how that practice operates, right? For the practice that was making a phone call to each of their patients after their eval, I'd say the provider probably gets a couple extra value units because now they don't have to do that, right? It's done automatically for them, and now they don't have to do that unless they really want to. For patients that are in very rural environments, which we have multiple practices in there, like now they can do more without having to come in as much, which lowers their resource allotment, right? We talk a lot about a patient's willing to resource. So there's the beautiful willingness to pay curve, right? In economics, we believe there's a willingness to resource curve in the physical therapy patient world, right? Where it's not just the copay. In fact, for a lot of people, the copay is not, it's not potentially not even their biggest like decision criteria, right? It's for me as a patient, it's, man, I got to go in the morning or else I'm not going to be able to go on my day, which means my wife needs to take our son to daycare, which means I need to ask her to do that. At some point, the pain of asking her to do that is going to be greater than the pain I'm in physically. And therefore, probably not going to want to go into the visit. And so if you think along the willingness to resource curve, if a patient is required to resource a lot more to come in for an in-person visit, then I give them more value units, right? In this very arbitrary currency I've created. And then finally, if it's high Medicare, especially, and you've been really hurt by cuts over the course of the past few years, really the past 30 years, and you're struggling to run the business. And so if you're 50% more Medicare, one, let us know. That is our bread and butter. That is absolutely what we do. We do really, really well there. And if you've been hit with pretty deep cuts, right, especially over these last couple of years, then this can be a way to turn I wonder if I'll survive this year to hey, I'm actually thriving this year.
Yeah. Yes. Good. Now, misconceptions about RTM. So what is everybody getting wrong about RTM in your experience?
One, that it has to be hard. I think that's it. This can't be easy. Yes, it can. It can be simple. It can be easy. And we're proving it every day. I think another is, it has to be exercises. No, it absolutely does not. These codes are applicable to all musculoskeletal conditions, right? Anything treating the musculoskeletal system. And there are conditions which we have seen where exercise data isn't actually even the most important, right? We have one, I love this question. And we have a pelvic floor dysfunction flow, which is really, we call it the GenaFlow because it's an OT out of Nashville who we created this specifically for. And one of the questions she asks is, or she has in her flow is, how much water did you drink today? Now, I didn't understand how in the world that could be clinically relevant until she explained it to me, like the child that I am. And it's like, well, Steven, here's how it works. I am not really asking about I'm asking about hydration, but I know my patients will dehydrate themselves in order not to have to urinate. And so this is a way for me to ask about urination without asking about urination, which tells me how well my treatment plan is going. I'm like, boom, like mind blown. That makes so much sense, right? What a clever way to get to the true data point that you need by asking it in a very
indirect way.
Yeah, an indirect way, right? Not confrontational is not the right word, but there. And so that's the other thing. It doesn't have to be exercises, and we can absolutely make a bunch of arguments. And we have clinicians who have helped us create, we call them flows, that ask for a lot of other things outside of exercise data, because that's important, right? There are going to be patients where whether they did 5 sets of 2 or 5 sets of 3 is going to be the most important data point. There's going to be a lot of other patients where understanding just if they did it or not is better than not getting any data. Or, hey, is this right? Like the exercises I've given you, are they too short, too long, or just right? That's our Goldilocks question. It's one of my favorites. Or even as we're blessed to work with a lot of balance and vestibular and vertigo and other non-ortho-based practices and Parkinson's. And so then it's around adult daily living. It's around being able to just, did you go outside, right? All of those data points, which are extremely important. So I think to distill it down into a couple, it doesn't have to be hard, right? It doesn't have to suck. It can be simple. It can be easy. And it doesn't have to be purely exercise based. And there's plenty of reasons for why it doesn't.
Yes. And I thought at first, it was about exercise too. So once I started looking into it, I was like, that's crazy. It's just like text messages.
It's just text messages, right? There's, as one of our owners said, there's magic in the messages. There's magic in the messages. And It's part of what we built.
Clearly.
It's part of what we built over the last 6 years, and I guess 7 now. Wow, time flies. So we had a running head start with hundreds of thousands of these messages that we've sent, received, and analyzed, maybe even in the millions now. So we know a good message when we see it and how to create it. And we now have outcomes to prove it, and the letter from the FDA saying, yep, like just because it's not complex to the patient doesn't mean there's not a ton of complexity that gets them to achieve that level on the SaRA side, which is ideal. Healthcare is hard enough. Being hurt is hard. Being hurt is not fun at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep it simple as possible.
Exactly.
And I like that you can adapt the question. So according to the practice or their needs, you can do different questions and to be relevant to that population. So that's super cool.
Yeah, my grandfather continues to battle Parkinson's and has for the last decade. And that's one of the reasons why we were extremely excited to get into some more neurological and balanced vestibular stroke type care or practices that focus on that. And he got hospitalized for a blockage, and he didn't get any PT or OT for 30 days while he was in there. And that it was extremely upsetting on multiple levels, right? Not only that happened, but that I didn't think to ask. I definitely feel responsibility for that, and it also gave me, which in turn I helped the team become very passionate about helping that population. Right, so much of the PT world is around orthopedic and sports injuries and all of that, and that's the really sexy areas, and we need more help for people like my grandfather, and I hope that we're a part of that solution and a part of the raising of that tide to be able to help those patients who truly do need a way to stave off the decline, right? To battle back against the decline and to empower them against the decline. Like, hey, you can fight this, and I'm here with you. How powerful is that, right? You're not alone. And so that's why I get excited to go work on this is to prevent it happening to somebody else's grandfather.
And that tells you why the outcomes message was more relevant to PTs. I guess like that's behind healthcare, where people get interest on becoming a healthcare provider or working with healthcare in general. So I think those are the right reasons.
Especially PTs.
Yes.
PTs. You don't get in this to make money.
No.
Absolutely not. You can't look at the math and be like, oh yeah, this is definitely gonna buy me a house in the hills. That's not it. And I respect that. It's an incredibly admirable, altruistic outlook, and unfortunately, I think there has been a great deal of injustice done to the PT industry simply for taking advantage of the rampant, in a good way, altruism in the industry, and that's the more and more I've dove into this from a business owner and CEO, the more and more I've seen how much value has been extracted from the physical therapist and put into other pockets that didn't earn it. And so I don't think we're a silver bullet, but goodness, can I be a squeaky wheel? And so that's I can at least dedicate my time to that.
Yes, and since we are talking about that, let's talk about ROI. So I know you have like a calculator on the website. So how should practices been thinking about the full ROI picture? Yeah.
So first of all, get out of the mindset of just revenue, right? So that's something I spend a lot of time coaching practice owners on. Is if you look at it from a pure revenue standpoint. Now we do have practices that are on average adding about $5 to $10 per visit in additional revenue via SaRA. Now you might look at that and be like, I don't know about that. Now, you got to think about the margin that gets created. So if you're on average making about $10 in margin per visit. For the way that we price, especially, you can basically make about $30 to $40 per month just with the connect and engage codes in margin. So now I'm looking like, if I enroll a patient onto SaRA, you're saying there's a good chance that I might make more margin on the RTM codes than I do on my visit codes. Yes, now it's not completely fair because you have so much stacked into that visit margin, right, with paying the therapist, with overhead, all those things. So it's not completely apples to apples. I totally get that. But as we see it, most of our practices right now are generating between $40 and $80 per enrolled patient per episode. So what that means is that's not per billable patient, per engaged patient. That's just if you put a patient on. That includes the patients that aren't going to engage, like in that number. So $40, $80, right? You're talking between $4 and $8, maybe $10, depending upon the length of the script per visit. And our goal is to always make sure our practices are at least at a 3x ROI. So if they make 4, they're only paying us 1. Is like the MBA math that I use to create our pricing. I was like, if they make $4, I just want one of them, and they get 3. Like that seems fair. Yeah. On the support codes, the ROI is even better. So for practices that are heavy into the support codes, their ROI is in like the 7 and 8 range. So extremely high. They're keeping a lot of that money, and that's because you're doing the work. So we take a little bit as part of helping you track it, helping you bill it, do all of those things. But you keep the lion's share of that. And I believe our pricing model and all that's on our website. We price per billable CPT code. So unless you can bill it, you don't pay us a dime. So back to the margin, right? Conversation is if you have to pay per enrolled patient, that means 100% of the patients you enroll, you have to pay for. With us, it's only the patients you can bill for, and then only the codes that we facilitate. So if you enroll 100 patients and 10 of those patients, which actually somewhere between 8 and 10 of those patients aren't billable for any codes, you don't owe us anything because we didn't do a good enough job training you. Our system didn't do a good enough job engaging your patient. All the fault lies on us, which is a great incentive for us to get better. But if they did get billable, and especially for that engage code, like that's where we charge the most on, but that's because our system is doing the majority of the work. But you're still making, again, $3 to $4 per every one that you're paying us. So that's that's the magical, like crazy science that went behind it. Was okay. How can we make sure that even if no support codes are billed, none, that a practice owner can still look at it back and be like, okay, I'm making at least $3 to $4 for every one I'm paying SaRA. That's how we came up with it.
So it's almost risk-free, pretty much.
Almost. We do a 60-day partnership trial that really is to help you figure out what your commercial payer response is going to be. And so during that, we help you bill for your first commercials. And then we also help you fight any denials that come across because we have access to price transparency data. So I know where there are RTM codes in contracts across the entire U.S. So if you come to me, hey, say Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee isn't paying me, I can say, well, I know that we have 4 other practices in Tennessee that are all getting paid by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee, and I know that through the price transparency data, it's in the physician fee schedule at these different amounts. So let's dive into what's happening. Oh, you have to use a modifier. If that's what's wrong, resubmit it. Okay, now we're all good. Which, we've been able to do that with practices because, again, with our model, if you don't enroll patients, we don't ever get the chance to make any money or to even like be effective, right? And if you don't get paid by that payer, you're not going to enroll that patient likely, which I totally get. And so it's in our best interest to help you fight those denials to increase the potential size of the population that you're willing to put on SaRA. So I've learned a lot more about denials and modifiers and all sorts of other stuff than I ever thought I would. But goodness, is it a thrill to get that email? Hey, Humana just paid us. We're good to go. Yes,
Yeah.
let's go. That is, I get so jazzed by those emails.
Oh, that's crazy. The craziness of the system. And I was going to ask you something so I was curious to ask you about the engagement. So is it like, do you have like numbers on that or something, like most patients engage, or like how is the average engagement? Would you expect to be able to bill like pretty much, close to, I don't know, 90% of your patients, 80%? I don't know
So
numbers.
our daily response rate, 65%. So it oscillates between like 62 and 68%. So on any given day, call it 65% of patients are responding. What that leads to is our average, we call it billability. So our billability for 98975 is about 92%. So 92% of patients that get enrolled are going to be billable for 98975. Then we have different 30-day cycles, right? So for the first cycle of 98977, that first 30 days, we're at about like 60 to 62% for that. So patients that in that first 30 days, they're about 62% of those are going to get billable for 98977, which means they're also billable for 9975. Cycle 2 drops to about 40%. So 40% of patients are billable for both cycle 1 and cycle 2. So you're able to bill 98977 twice. And then cycle 3 is about 15%, although we're starting to see that go up, I think, as we get into more and more of these neurological falls, vestibular, like longer episode type practices. So that's starting to go up. And so what does that equate to? Right now, the pure average, and I just ran this yesterday, each patient enrolled onto SaRA, on average, is going to generate about $67 in revenue. So that includes patients that don't engage. That includes patients that are only for 98975, only for 1 98977, for 3 999. Like all that is total package. Like if you enroll a patient, highly likely that you're going to get paid $67, which on average. Now there are things you can do that, and we have some outliers that we're using those best practices to help elevate everybody else. And some of our outliers are in the 90s and 100s. Of dollars per patient enrolled, because their engagement is so good over the course of an episode, and that's not including any of the support codes. So that's just, did our software do its job? If yes, collect $60. Like that's it. If you start adding in the support codes, it just gets even more fun. We had one practice owner, they billed like 100 98980s and 98981s in December, and they're about a 4 PT practice. They had a lot of bad weather, a lot of cancellations, and a lot of other things. And so they used that time to check in with their patients and make sure everything is okay. And sure enough, there was a lot of times it wasn't. And they're able to get things figured out, get things fixed, all done remotely. And so for them, they were just like, holy cow, we probably would have done this anyway and just simply not billed for it because we wouldn't have known how to get paid for it. But now here's this amazing opportunity for us to get compensated for the clinical value that we're delivering. And it's like, yes, that's it.
They would do it anyway, so at least now they're getting paid.
Yeah, that's a problem. Like back to our the earlier point of the injustice on the PT world. Some of it has been kind of brought on by yourselves by not fighting for the value to get recognized for the value you're delivering. Right? Like, oh, they can just have that free. I don't want the patient to have to pay anything else. Like, there is not a PCP out there. Well, okay. The vast majority of primary care physicians are not thinking, I wonder if I should not run this test because the patient might have to pay $20. No, that thought is not crossing the mind of anyone, and nor should it, right? Like, hey, if I think this is the best thing for my patient, I should just do it. Now, I know the dynamics are different because it's within typically an 8 to 12 week period, and there's copay, all that stuff. Totally get that. I know there's context there, but generally speaking, every other provider out there just prescribes what they think is best, and like, patient figure it out. I don't know what your insurance is going to do, and PTs I think have been giving away too much for too long, and so it's created this deflated cost of delivering that now with the rise of inflation, everything else is really biting everybody. So yeah.
Unfortunately. And when you said 65, the average, like every patient enrolled, is that for the episode of care?
Correct. Yes. For that episode. Yep. For that episode. And we haven't done any research on this yet, but now you've kind of got me thinking. We built a feature called the re-enroll feature way earlier than we thought we would need to. And so we have already had patients that have gone through an episode with SaRA, gotten discharged, and then come back because they texted that number, because we keep it live. We don't shut it down. And so texted back, hey, my lower back flared up. Could I come back and see you again? And that's already started to happen, which is super exciting. We're working with a large firm right now, still in the private practice world. And when they went and added another 3 clinics and expanded our pilot with them, that was the story the regional director wanted to say. Was not about the revenue, and granted, it was to providers and to PT, so probably not as relevant. It was about, hey, in our clinic, so he works out of one, and then it's regional. In our clinic, we've already had patients that have texted us post-discharge and come in for a new issue and a new eval. Like, that's cool. That means as that patient doesn't think about anyone else for their care. If I have musculoskeletal pain, Matt's my guy, right? Adriana's my guy or girl. Like, whatever it is, I now have my person, and that's a power, and it's frictionless. That's powerful. That's new. That's redefining physical therapy from being physical therapy, the amorphous blob, to being, I have a physical therapist. And I think that's powerful.
That's a huge value because you keep them engaged and then they just go back right in. So it's very powerful for sure. Steven, so any advice to clinicians that they are thinking about start using RTM? Anything for them?
Anything, and not self-serving. No, the understand what it's meant to facilitate, which is your freedom as a clinician to treat the way that you want to treat, and then figure out what tool best helps you do that. It might be SaRA, it might not be. That's fine. Really, there's a massive market out there. There's going to be tons of winners. I truly believe that a rising tide raises all boats. So I'd say, don't think about it in terms of the codes, right? Don't put on the blinders of, these 4 CPT codes, what do I need to do? Take a step back. Like, okay, if I had all this freedom and I was able to practice the way I wanted to practice, how would things change? I'd love to be able to check in on my patients every day. Okay. What kind of population do you see? I see 30, 40%, even more Medicare. Like, I'm worried about them downloading an app. Like, perfect. Like, we would be a really good fit there. Now, if it's hey, I see a very high performance patient population that they're going to want the app. Like, they're going to set up the tripod and they're going to do the movements, right, to have it give feedback on their form. Like, we're not it, quite frankly. Like, that's not us, right? So I think it's answering the question to yourself, how do I want to evolve? How would I practice if I had a magic wand, right? Then, okay, that's it. So now, with the constraints of my patients, their tech adoption levels, with the insurances I have, all those things, now I get to go choose the tool and the partner that I want to bring in to help me facilitate it. So that's what I would say. And if, always happy to do, I've done a lot of these RTM 101s. So I've done it at the National Association of Rehab Agencies. I've done it at a few state physical therapy associations, state APTA groups, and others, and always happy to do that with groups as small as one and as big as you want to make it. That's that's a primary role right now. CEO, the E stands for educator in a lot of ways. And so more than happy to deliver that in whatever ways possible. And yeah, we have a good amount of content out there as well. But I'd say think of the magic wand. How would I treat if I had no concerns, right? Or no limitations. Okay, now I know that. All right, now let me start to layer on some of my constraints and then figure out what tool is best from there.
Cool. Very cool. Before we wrap up, anything else you want to add? I know we talked a lot about a lot of different things. So anything that you want to add that we left off that you think it's relevant, important?
We got through a lot. You did an amazing job in this interview. I'm very thankful, obviously well prepared. So I thank you very much for your time and preparation and helping this to be an extremely concise, but as well as informative, I hope, for the listeners' conversation. I guess the last thing, if you want to reach out to me, discuss whether you're interested in seeing it, if maybe we could work together from a you being a practice leader or clinician. My email is Steven, so Steven at SaRaHealth.com, so SaRA Health.com. If you're an EMR or other like billing group or anyone like that wants to talk about any sort of partnerships, please let us know. We have integrations right now with, I think, 12 or 15 of the EMRs. So WebPT, Clinician, Prompt, PT Everywhere, Net Health, ECW, Athena, and a few more that I'm not. Raintree. So Raintree's their web version, not the desktop, but when they go web-based, we'll have that as well. Or we already have it, just people don't use the web-based one yet. I'm just waiting on that one. That'll be good. Happy to talk about partnerships. We've already partnered with a few device companies. So I think that's where we're headed, is how do we best facilitate this relationship between a provider and patient. And it's not by having a closed walled system. So we're happy to talk with folks and already have partnerships with groups like Orbit Telehealth and others. Because I believe it's all about the relationship, and I think that's what we help facilitate. And we get you paid for it too. So that's that.
Awesome. And I know you are on LinkedIn as well, posting that I see. And on the website, you also have the ROI calculator that I think is pretty cool that people can go to, right? It's a good resource. Yep. Anything else we are forgetting?
I don't think so. And that's due to your solid work in prepping. So thank you very much. And thank you to those for listening. It's a blessing to have you give us over an hour of your time.
I appreciate your time, also sharing all your information and clarifying a lot of things. So it was very helpful, and I believe it's going to be very helpful for a lot of clinicians too and private practice owners to learn more about it. And I think it's just important to share all this knowledge and make things easier and simple. So people don't think it's this huge difficult thing. You're trying to bring more information so people hopefully take advantage of what seems like to be a super cool tool to help us get paid for what we are already doing. So I think that's very, just valuing our time more. So that's really good.
You nailed it. I wouldn't have had you summarize it any differently, which means we did a great job. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Steven.